This weekend, I had a rather traumatic and stressful event take place during travel. And I'm sharing this story for a couple of reasons. One, to hopefully prevent any other individual from experiencing what I had to go through. Two, to bring about an awareness to other individuals with a medical condition on what to be prepared for. And also for clarification from American Airlines, and honestly, an understanding from all airlines, what the protocol is regarding individuals with medical conditions, and if this event that happened to me was as American Airlines intended, or if it was an independent act of discrimination. I was on my second flight on a return home trip, and I was almost removed from the plane due to my medical condition. I have adrenal deficiency. That means my adrenal glands are no longer producing the necessary hormones my body needs to live. Luckily, I have oral medication I take to compensate. It is a life-saving steroid. I take it a couple times a day, sometimes more as needed. During a medical emergency, or if I'm unable to orally administer my medication, I would need an emergency injection of the steroid or Solu-Cortef. Those of us with adrenal insufficiency may need emergency injections during an emergency or medical situation. This is something that I share with everyone everywhere I go to keep myself safe. It is a safety precaution. Every time I travel by myself, I always let a flight attendant know about my condition and my kit. It goes a little something like this. I'll say, hey, just wanted to give you a heads up. I have adrenal insufficiency, and if there is a medical crisis, I may need an emergency injection. My medication's in here, and then I keep it in that little seat pocket. And I always say, but I shouldn't need to use it. I've never need to use it on a plane. Just want to make sure that somebody knows in case of an emergency. And usually their response is like, okay, thanks for telling me. Or is there anything else we need to know about it? Or sometimes they'll say, oh, what does that really entail? And then usually I'll open the kit and show what's inside it, the emergency injection, the steps, and reiterate, I will probably not need to use it, but it's good for someone to know in an emergency. And that's usually the end of it. And I've never had a problem, ever. I was on my second American Airline flight of the day. The first flight, did this with the flight attendant, no issues. They said, okay, thanks for letting me know. The end. The second flight, I get on, do my same spiel to the flight attendant, and their response was, okay. And then they walked away. We're like 5 minutes till takeoff. Fine. That individual comes back and the flight attendant says, can you tell me a little bit more about this? And I say, okay. So I get my kit out of the pocket and I say, this is only in an emergency situation. It's never happened to me on a plane, probably won't, but it's just good for someone to know. I open it up and then I show there's a compartment for instructions. This breaks it down, shows you exactly how to do it, how to administer it. Here's the medication and here's the syringes. And then the flight attendant says, I need to tell the pilot. I go, okay. So they walk away and I see the flight attendant go into the cockpit surrounded by other flight attendants. A few minutes go by and a new American Airline employee who is not a flight attendant or a pilot, someone new comes to me and says, ma'am, I need you to follow me. And I'm thinking, I guess I need to show the pilot my kit. This is bizarre. This has never happened before. Bring my kit, go up to the front. She turns around and says, ma'am, where's your bag? And I say, why? She says, we can't have you on this flight. And I go, I'm sorry, what? And she says, for liability reasons, we can't administer your medication, so we can't have you on our flight. And I said, okay, so how am I gonna get home? And she says, we have a 7:30 flight that we can try to get you on, but let's do that off the plane. And I said, if you can't, for liability reasons, allow me on this flight, Why will I be allowed to be on a 7:30 flight? And she said, we don't know for sure, but let's figure this out off the plane. And I knew right then and there, if I got off of that plane, I would be stranded in Phoenix. My options would be to, clearly this airline wasn't going to let me fly with them. I'd have to find a new flight with a new airline, get a rental car, or have my partner fly in to fly me home like a chaperone. So I'm completely taken aback, stressed out, and I knew in this moment I had to advocate for myself and do it as calmly and clearly as possible, otherwise I wasn't going to get home. So I said, look, I understand for liability reasons you are not able to administer medication. I am not asking you to. I work for the National Adrenal Diseases Foundation, and we work with educating medical professionals, EMS, and helping patients learn about how to advocate for themselves, as well as administer medication. In situations where EMS are unable to administer medication, the loophole is that civilians can do it. So I said that. I said, this is the loophole that EMS has shared and that we have knowledge of. Can that apply here? If a civilian on the plane is willing to administer the medication, can I stay on this flight? She says, no, ma'am. At this time, one of the flight attendants is, listening and leans over and says, what's this disease called? And I said, it's Addison's disease. She said, oh, my dog had that. I had to administer injections. I know how to do that and I feel comfortable. She then said to that airline employee, if I'm comfortable giving her the injection, can she just stay on the flight? And that employee said, no one from our team is allowed to administer medication. And if we keep her on this flight and we have to reroute due to a medical emergency, it's a liability for us. So I go back to the civilian situation. And at this time, the whole plane is seeing what's happening, but first class can hear what is happening. And two of them in first class say, we'd be willing to administer it. Can you show us how to do it? And I said, yes. So I get my kit, I open it up, I show them the compartments, I show them where everything is, show them the instructions. And again, reiterate, this is probably not going to happen. It's never happened on a flight. In the 10 years that I've had this disease, I've never had an adrenal crisis on a plane. I think this employee was either with legal or HR, I don't know, but they weren't someone that flew on the plane. She's on the phone now with someone, clearly someone on their legal team or liability or whatever it is. And she's now asking me questions. And we are like delayed. And I can tell that half the plane wants me off and the other half is in support and giving me support, offering me water, being very kind and understanding and empathetic. But I knew if I got off that plane, I wouldn't get back on one. And I didn't want to be stranded in Phoenix. So she's asking me questions, and essentially she starts listing the signs and symptoms of an adrenal crisis and asking me if I'm in them. She says, are you dizzy? No. Are you vomiting? No. Do you have diarrhea? Nope. And then at that point I said, look, I know the signs and symptoms of an adrenal crisis. I am not in one. Please let me stay on this flight. And she says, ma'am, we need to confirm that you're fit to fly. And I said, I am. She said, we can't take your word for it. It has to be from a medical professional. And at this point, my gears start turning and I'm like, so how does this work for other people with medical conditions? Do you do the same thing with people with EpiPens? Do you kick them off the flight? Are they not allowed to fly on your plane? How does that work? She says, they need notification from a medical professional. Well, it's 6 o'clock in my time zone. My doctor's not going to answer. And also, what is that going to do over the phone? For future reference, my mind goes, okay, I need a medical note in addition to all my medical supplies that says I'm fit to fly, but that can't help me right now in this moment. She continues to talk to someone on the phone. At this point, it's been 35 minutes. We are delayed. I am getting anxious. I am getting very stressed out. I'm doing the absolute best that I possibly can to remain calm, to be articulate, but also advocate and firm, because being kicked off because of a condition shouldn't be a thing. I share my medical condition for emergency situations. And I brought that up. I said, for those patients with EpiPens or those of us with medical conditions who carry medical devices, is it better for us not to tell you? Should we hide those things? But then if we do, what happens during a medical emergency? Wouldn't it be better for the patient and for everyone on the plane and who is on or team member of the airline to know what to do in an emergency? I like to be prepared. I don't think I should have to hide my condition and put myself at risk to be treated fairly and to be allowed onto a flight. So she's continuing to talk to someone on the phone. I'm still talking with those in first class who are all advocating and saying, we're happy to give you this injection. We're just waiting for this phone call to resolve to something. So she comes back in again. I repeat once more, I'm not in an adrenal crisis. The civilians have agreed to administer it. Can I please go back to my seat? And she said, let me ask the pilots. So she asks the pilots. They must have said yes, didn't hear it. She came back out and sat with those civilians and said, you agreed to administer this medication in a crisis. And both of them say yes. And she says, okay, you can return to your seat. And I'm like, first off, phew, I can get on the flight and go home as intended. And I ask, how do I prevent this in the future? How do I avoid being removed from a flight due to a medical condition that I have no control over? And she starts to say, prior to buying your tickets, you could let the airline know or at the front desk before you get on the plane. And I quickly realized this is a longer conversation and it's not going to be solved right now. And I needed to just get in my seat and stress dose before they changed their mind. So I sat down, stress dosed, and we were off. Landed, made it home. It was so stressful, so traumatic, that the event alone could have sent me into an adrenal crisis. But I'm so thankful that I'm someone who's had this disease for 10 years and I work for NADF and know how to advocate. I'm so thankful this didn't happen to someone newly diagnosed or someone who doesn't know the vocabulary or it's just a stressful situation. No question is, American Airlines, is that your protocol to kick people off of flights because of their medical conditions? So should you be kicking off anyone who tells you about any sort of anaphylactic treatment? Or I don't know, if someone has diabetes, are they going to get kicked off? I really don't understand. So I want clarity on what is the actual standard protocol. Was that handled the way that you wanted it handled? And other airlines, what is your protocol? How do you handle medical situations? I understand that you can't administer. That is not the thing that I was upset about. It was about being removed from a situation. I wasn't asking them to give me injection. I was literally just telling someone, informing the crew, because they're the ones that during an emergency are going to be the helpers, you would think, you would hope. This experience made me, first off, never want to fly American Airlines again because I do not feel safe, I do not feel supported, and I do not feel welcome. But it also took away a sense of independence. It made me never want to fly alone. I was terrified. If I had been stranded there, that stressful event on its own could have sent me into an adrenal crisis. And then what would I have done by myself? We shouldn't be afraid to fly and or afraid that we're going to be removed from flights. It's like that situation. Do I not tell anyone and be at risk in a situation that no one knows what's happening to me? Or do I tell someone and risk being discriminated against? I'm curious what other individuals with adrenal insufficiency, but also other medical conditions that have either emergency medicine or devices or special things to be aware of, how do you travel? Do you tell the flight attendants? Do you tell the airline? Do you do this before you purchase your ticket? I'm very curious what the community does. And I also want to start a conversation with everyone about how we can avoid this, because I don't want to have to hide my disease, because that could kill me in an emergency if nobody knows, in order for me to be allowed on to a plane. I'm still processing. There's a lot to go through. And I just want for all individuals to feel safe. I want patients to feel supported. And I want clarity on what the rules are, because it was very unclear. Since I flew 3 other American airline flights that week, no issues. Told all of them my condition, here's my kit. Almost all of their responses were, okay, thanks for letting me know. This was the first time in 10 years of having this condition that anyone has ever removed me or attempted to remove me from a space or place because I was a liability. I wrote out absolutely everything that happened in order as soon as it happened while it was fresh in my mind. But this is basically the summary of what happened. It was stressful, it was terrifying, it was really traumatic, and I'm gonna be recovering for some time now because it took so much of my energy and my cortisol. So curious what other people do, what other people think, and would love to hear from American Airlines about how you actually want to treat individuals with medical conditions. Hopefully it wasn't like that. Because if so, I highly recommend that no one with any condition, chronic illness, or disability fly on American Airlines because they might remove you.